welcome to our pandemic virtual version of In the Studio here at Davis Media Access. I'm Autumn Labbe-Renault, and thanks for tuning in. Joining me today is Susan Jones, who is the founder and principal consultant for an organization called Creative Behavior Systems. We're going to take on a few heavy topics today, but we're also going to talk about the promise of resiliency, and that's exciting. We're going to be talking about something called adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, and how Susan's firm is working to address the impact of ACEs, as well as something called trauma-informed response. And we'll also discuss her involvement with a group here in Yolo County called Resilient Yolo. And an upcoming summit on all of this, I'm looking forward to learning more, and I hope you are too. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Autumn. I appreciate being here.
It's my pleasure. So you and I knew each other a long time ago when our kids were in school. And if memory serves, you were working primarily in schools at that point. And so let's start with creative behavior systems, when and why you founded your business.
So working in schools, I found that a lot of the more traditional behavioral systems and supports and interventions really didn't pay much attention to the social and emotional realm, or the capacity of where the students were lagging in skills and needed to be taught how to do something differently, opposed to going down the disciplinary paths and not really ever addressing the reasons why the behaviors were occurring in the first place. So that was the very beginning when I was working in schools back when our kids were friends, way back when they were little.
Way back when, I know. So currently, one piece of your work involves something called the Resilient Yolo Planning Group. And my understanding is that it was kind of an outgrowth from a big study that was done on ACEs and again, adverse childhood experiences. So can you tell us more about the study and how that's been informing your work?
So in the mid-90s, there was two physicians. One was Dr. Falidi and one was Dr. Onda, CDC and Kaiser. And they did a research study of 17,500 participants, predominantly Caucasian, predominantly college educated. And what they found was when there was adverse situations in childhood, there was a direct health correlation later on in life. And they did a research study. And from this research study, they found that there was 10 different arenas of very specific areas of adversity that correlated to the health outcomes. And this study was called the ACE study. And like I said, it was back in the mid-1990s.
Right. It's interesting you clarified that it was the participants were mostly Caucasian and mostly college educated, because I think and I hope if that study were to be done today that some of the demographics there would be a little bit different. But so then what is Resilient YOLO and how has that been an outgrowth from, connecting the dots from your work, that study, and now Resilient YOLO?
So looking back at my work and really looking at the lagging skills, and I'm going to use a hand model that Dr. Dan Siegel uses quite frequently. So prefrontal cortex, our executive functions, and our amygdala, our emotional driver. Essentially, when you are lagging in skills in order to respond in a calm manner and are much more reactive, a really simple way to look at it is your prefrontal cortex goes a little bit offline. And being able to bring it back online was a lot of those skill teaching and building that I noticed that students needed when they were younger in school settings, as well as sometimes staff and colleagues. And
Right.
it's really a human thing more than just a student related topic. So creative behavior systems came from literally me creating a Facebook page that wanted to get a lot of this information out as a resource for predominantly the hundreds of teachers that I was working with over the years. And then while this was going on, The author of the ACE study was Jane Stevens, who lives in Yolo County, and she had started something called ACEs Connection. And ACEs Connection is now worldwide, but it started as a county-based group, and there are hundreds of county-based ACEs Connection groups now, but everybody has adopted their own name. Yolo County's ACEs Connection group is called Resilient Yolo. And my co-lead and I, Tessa Smith, have just taken over Resilient YOLO in the leadership role just earlier this year.
Well, congratulations on that. And I was going to ask you about Tessa, because I know you mentioned her as we were preparing for this. Who are some of the other partners or participants in Resilient YOLO?
So Resilient YOLO really began in its beginning back in 2013. In 2013, Resilient YOLO was started with a woman who is the director of Yolo County CASA, Tracy Favre, and she was working with some youth intervention services in the county, and we're going after some grant money. And during this collaborative time, they ran across the ACEs study and ACEs Connection and connected with Jane Stevens. And that's how the very first Resilient YOLO group started. There are many different partners involved. Yolo County Office of Education has been a prominent partner in a lot of the work. There was a significant summit that was put on a couple of years ago with YCOE and Resilient YOLO and had hundreds of participants. And we are also planning another one very soon.
Right. And of course, planning anything during the ongoing pandemic is just layers of complication. I wanted to say Tracy Favre is a friend, and I adore her, and she does such good work in this community. Okay, so there is, when I looked at, I want to tell viewers, the URL to get to Resilient YOLO is about a mile long. So what I'm going to tell you to do is just Google Resilient YOLO, and it comes up at the top of the page, and you can click on it and go straight there. But as I was perusing that site, you did mention an upcoming summit, but you've also have a webinar series going on. So let's hear a little bit more about that. And are the webinars accessible to the general public? Is there a cost? That kind of information would be great.
So the webinar series will be listed on the Resilient YOLO website, and they are open to the public. And how the webinar series came to be is because we wanted to do a Building a Resilient YOLO summit this month, actually. But due to the challenges with the pandemic, we decided that doing an in-person summit really just wasn't the best way to handle it at this time. So we thought, let's get the work going and let's get it rolling out to the general public. So we decided to start a webinar series that will be on November 5th is the first one, and it will be quarterly, and there will be different topics all about building resilience, but specifically focused on Yolo County, all of the different arenas from healthcare to education to community building, and covering all of them in all of the different webinars.
Right. I know this is focused on early childhood, but trauma impacts so many of us at so many different points in our life. So I'm willing to bet that that would be useful for a very wide variety of people. And I'm so glad you were able to come here today and share a little bit about the group and its work. And I want to end by asking you what your personal hopes are for the outcome and the impact that Resilient YOLO has.
So my personal hopes are going to link to even going back to my years in education. And a lot of the pieces that I would like to see change in are the systems of oppression that many of us work in, and sometimes we don't even have the awareness, or not even intentionally meaning to cause any harm, but quite a bit of our systems do cause significant layers of oppression to occur for many individuals. And looking at health equity and race equity, and also, everything from gender to, I mean, I could go on and on. There's just
Hmm.
quite a bit of oppression that's embedded to all of our social systems that are intact today. And once people have a higher awareness of what it looks like moment to moment to be trauma informed, that really opens up the opportunities to make the changes that we need to see and we want to see, especially in our county, Yolo County.
Okay. Well, it's important work you're doing, and I thank you for joining us here today. We've been speaking with Susan Jones, wearing two hats here as the founder of Creative Behavior Systems and the co-lead of Resilient Yolo. Again, Google Yolo. You'll get right there, and you can also Google Creative Behavior Systems and find out more about Susan and her work. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, this will air on DCTV channel 15 on the Comcast system in Davis, and you can find it on our YouTube channel as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.